Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Please welcome location sound mixer and boom op, TJ Garland.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Now, TJ, we always like to start off the show by asking, when you're working on set, what's in your audio kit?
As a boom operator, or if I'm just doing a one-man band bag mix sort of thing?
Let's start off with the one-man band bag mix.
Okay. Usually, most projects require a multi-track recorder, and I use a Zoom F8, and I have an Orca bag for that F8. I have a petrol harness, and I use a K-Tech boom pole with a NTG3 shotgun mic. That's my basic kit, and then I have Sennheiser wireless channels for, lav mics and stuff. So I usually, for my basic package, have 2 wireless channels with my boom. Anything else is going to be an additional cost and whatnot. And that includes camera hops, Comtex or IFBs for producers and stuff to listen, all that sort of stuff. Even if they wanted it like a smart slate, I would charge extra for that, even though I would provide time code. That's another thing. I use Tentacle sync boxes for time code, up to 2 cameras, like sync boxes if they need, to be tethered to the camera. Sometimes you just want to leave them on there instead of constantly having to rejam them with time code. So I have 2 of those. Any extras, another cost, but generally they don't need any.
And what about power distribution?
For power distribution, I have the MP1 batteries. I just have a standard remote audio power distribution. I just plug in my MP1 bat. It's a lithium ion battery. I keep about 2 charged up, and if I need more based on however many wireless channels I have, because, the more channels you're plugging into your mixer, the harder it's going to be to power that thing. So I might use more, but generally I just need 2. Those things last forever. I also have a MKH50 that I'll use if I'm doing a bag rig. Generally, it all depends, but I find that I use the shotgun mic more versus situations where a 50 would be more reasonable, because a 50 is great for, unscripted dialogue, improv, or even somebody side by side interviewing somebody. It'll just flow better and catch people because it's got a broader pickup pattern. But then again, when I'm doing these bag rigs, we're always shooting in noisy locations, so I need a shotgun mic, to really kind of hone out all the extra noise, and it's got a much more narrow pattern. I just find myself using that one the most.
Okay, so the NTG3's got a little bit of a narrower pattern.
Yeah, it's your basic shotgun mic. It's almost identical to the 416. That's why I got it. Just save a few $100. The only thing that's different is it has a little bit more of a low end, but I kind of like it because it mixes better with the Sanken Cause 11. Whenever they're mixing together, if I'll pull down the shotgun and pull that up if I need to, or in post, I've worked with both of those sort of tracks. It flows. It's almost seamless because of that extra little low end. The 416 doesn't really have, so I kind of like it better.
All right. So you're using the COS 11s with your Sennheisers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And have you compared, I'm just curious, say from Sennheiser, when you've got such a great mic on it, from Sennheiser to say Electrosonic to, WheezyCom or whatever out there, have you ever had a chance to compare and hear if there was a big difference?
I have. I've compared with Electro and Sennheiser, because I used to work at the rental place Gotham Sound in Atlanta. I needed a little more job security at the time because I had my daughter coming, and I was like, yeah, I'll work here for about a year or whatever and help them open it up. And it was fun because I got to get my hands on all sorts of equipment, compare stuff. Anytime I had a question about some new piece of gear, I just got to play with it versus looking online for forums and stuff. I'm like, well, I'll just listen for myself. I compared Cause 11s with the Electro connection versus the Sennheiser connection, and they both sound pretty much identical, but the difference with the Electro is they just have a much more capacity to handle their dynamic range. It's just much more vast than Sennheiser. So you'll get clipping from a Sennheiser much faster than you would with the Electro.
Okay.
They sound better. But then again, they're top of the line. You get what you pay for, and the people at Electrosonics, they're great, and all their gear is just, I haven't seen anything better.
Okay. So are you using, is it the G3s for Sennheiser?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like the G3s. Usually when you buy like a G3 talent pack, you'll get a microphone that comes with it, and those microphones are great too. Believe it or not, they're a little bit more thicker and bulkier. But if you're doing bag stuff, use your imagination. You can make anything work, and they still sound great and aren't too far off sounding from a Cause 11. So
okay, great.
The people at Post, they can always play around with a little bit of EQ and fix or mix and match whatever they want, but it's never that big of an issue for them. So,
okay. So you have the COS 11s with the, what's a 3.5 millimeter jack you plug in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. Have you had a chance to try the new Sennheiser G4s yet?
No, I haven't, but I should probably one day when I get free, just go over to Gotham or True and just play around with them. And that's the good thing is you can go to these places and just grab one of the things out of rental or even open up a new product and they'll let you toy around with them and test them, so long as you know what you're doing, of course.
Oh, that's great, though, that you actually worked in the facility and you had access to all that gear. You could try, you could decide which ones you like best. That's a great opportunity.
Well, not only that, because we didn't have anybody in maintenance or repair in the Atlanta chapter for Gotham Sound, and I got kind of thrown into it just because I had a little knack for soldering.
Okay.
And because I kind of picked it up real quickly, they're like, hey, you can solder. Why don't you get over in the maintenance thing and start making, some cables and repairing some, wireless mics and all this. And I started doing that for several months. And it was, both a headache and a learning experience. And it also helped me understand just how more of these components work and which one's more reliable in my opinion, because, I see which ones kind of come in more broken versus others and for what reasons, et cetera.
It's like a mechanic, it's when you're buying a car, it's always good to ask a mechanic, what cars do you see the most in here getting repaired?
Yeah. And what seems to be the most common issue with this and that. And you can really get a good opinion from somebody who's dealt with that firsthand. So
excellent. What are the main audio projects that you usually work on?
Main audio projects I work on are just union gigs. I mainly just do television shows, movies. Then on the side, I'll occasionally do like a commercial or an industrial or something. But my main income is mostly union productions. So.
Okay. Now I was looking at I was checking out your IMDb account, and you worked on Atlanta as a boom op.
Yes, the first season of Atlanta. Yeah, that was fun. I ended up getting a call from Michael Wynn, who's a good friend of mine, mixer, and he's like, yeah, there's this new show, they got picked up, and it's this guy named Donald Glover, and he's supposed to be like a famous rapper. And I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that like Danny Glover's son or something? And it's like, I don't know, but we're going to work on it. And I was like, okay. And then once I started telling all my friends, like, do you know anything about the Donald Glover? And they're like, what? So I was like, okay, cool. Well, this is something fun to be on, I guess. I'm apparently not up to date with certain current events just because I'm on set probably way too much. But yeah, and then it was a fun gig. Everything was shot on location. I shit you not, everything was shot on location except for one day, and it was car work. And we rented out like a warehouse to do that.
Wow.
So it was grueling, all through the summer filming that thing.
Wow. So take me through it. What would be a typical day as a boom op on that show?
You come in, make sure everything is rebatted. You got to have batteries, fresh batteries, and all your stuff in your gear. You'd find yourself some sides, and then you'd look at the sides, which are basically all the parts of the script that you're shooting that day, all the different scenes. It breaks it down in the order you'll be shooting it, even though they hardly follow that order. They'll love to keep you on your toes and switch things up. And then in each scene, it breaks down on the sides how many actors there will be, who's all speaking, etc. So I'd look at all this stuff, and I'll try to memorize basically their lines, so I know their cues and whatnot before I even get on set. And this is even before rehearsal starts. So I'll study those lines a little bit, and then once I got the first 2 scenes that we're going to be shooting down, I'll go ahead and wait around on set, check out the set, see what kind of obstacles I might face based on anything that the sides describe, like, oh, Sally sits down in the chair or something like that. I'll go check out, like, well, is there a chandelier right over that chair, and just kind of spitball a little bit, even though none of that stuff is really, all that can go away because it depends on how they light it, but I like to just check out my environment, get familiar with it, because God only knows what kind of obstacles you might have. And it's good to always have a contingency plan or just a thought process one step ahead. And then, once they call in the rehearsal, we watch the rehearsal with the actors, and they'll go through their sides, and we'll do, blocking if we need to, which is basically how the actors are going to stand, where they're going to walk, what they're going to do, their actions. And once they're done with the rehearsal, we cut on the rehearsal. That's when they start lighting it. They start setting up the cameras and the first angle of the shot. It's up to me to basically report back to my sound mixer what they're doing in this shot, what they're doing in this whole scene, what their actions are, and what the first shot is. I'll basically go from there and work my way around the crew, work with the gaffer and the director of photography about, what they're doing with the shot, and maybe if I have shadow issues, they'll work with me, etc. And it's like that just basically the rest of the day, just every shot, going through the motions, problem solving with everybody. Sometimes, I'll need to change microphones depending on the shot. I might need to put in a plant mic. The sound utility will always mic up talent, regardless if we need to or not, because you never know. At the last minute, we might need to have them wired, and it's best to have that wire on them instead of stopping production, wasting time right then and there to put it on.
That's good.
So, yeah, that's basically what happens within a day,
Do you find that production is pretty flexible with you as you're setting up your boom and you're like, okay, we're getting a shadow here. They're pretty good about adjusting lighting and stuff for you?
I find it just, it depends on the DP, really, and your key grip and your gaffer and all that. It's based on their experience or even their level of cooperation. Some people just don't even give a shit, and it's really disrespectful. And you can do 2 things about that. You can, have your mixer just put on his mixer hat, because he's the boss of the sound crew team, and, address it with the director if it's, a serious issue. Or you just, if it's the case where they don't care, they want to just loop something, then so be it. But yeah, usually if the DP is really experienced, really good and cooperative, there's always, I've found that there's always a way to make both departments happy, to light it in a way where it looks great, as well as being able to get the boom in. The inexperienced, more uncooperative DP will just be like, no, I don't know any other way to do it. This is the way it has to be lit. This is the way it has to be shot, and it's like, okay, you obviously just don't care, or you just don't know any other way because you never tried, that sort of thing. I've been in a situation where the gaffer who knows more about lighting than the DP, is just sitting there apologizing to me like, well, he has us lighting it like this. I'm like, well, why? And he's like, that's the way he wants it. And he doesn't know that we could do this, or this, and it's not my place to tell him, And if you even try to make suggestions like that, some people get offended, and it's like, oh, what, you think you know more than me? It's like, no, I'm just trying to weigh out all my options, You always have to be a people person. It's very political whenever you're working on set. Everybody's trying to, achieve the same objective, but at the same time, they're all trying to make their own department look good and do what they need to do. And not a lot of people consider or think about sound. So it's up to you to be, the smooth-tongued, warrior of the sound department as a boom operator to really work with people and get them to do what you want. So
on a big, say, a feature film like that, can you, just for some of our listeners, kind of break down who all's on the sound department and what their responsibilities are?
Sure. You have the sound mixer, and his responsibility is to mix the sound that we're recording, as well as manage and run the entire sound department team. He's constantly talking and communicating back and forth between the boom operator as to what's going on set and what he would prefer to be done. And usually if they've been working together long enough, they kind of know what each person prefers in certain situations, like what microphones to choose. There's a level of trust there that's built up. And if you're new with each other, there's a lot more communication going on, And then he also communicates with the sound utility as to what maybe needs to be done as far as before, talent arrives, or certain situations on the location where he needs to be so he's not in the way, being able to just communicate with all the other departments. He does a good bit, but at the same time, if his crew is doing good, he doesn't have to worry too much. You know what I mean? But he's definitely the shot caller, and he does a lot of prepping and stuff for the other days ahead. He'll go to location scouts with people if they even let him know about it. Some productions, they'll just go off and do this stuff without even telling sound. Yeah, he's working with a lot of the other big wigs in the departments and whatnot to keep the ball rolling for us ahead of times, and it's his job to make sure that everything's running properly. If something breaks down, it's his equipment that we're using. So he'll need to, email production about, certain repairs or something like that, or he'll have, his utility do it if, he's constantly working or mixing or something like that. So, but that's mainly it. He's there to come on the set and put his foot down if he needs to, and he's actively listening to what's being recorded and mixed and operate all the recording gear, basically.
Okay.
So now there's the boom operator who's on the other side of that line, and he's always on set. He's actively representing the sound department on set and communicating with all the other departments on set and relaying to the sound mixer, what's going on. That way he has a better understanding of how to mix things and in what order things are going. And so, like, for instance, if we're just shooting like a piece of, this one scene of this dialogue, even though the last setup we had gone through the entire scene, we might just be doing this person's coverage and cutting and moving over. So, it's my job to relay that to him. So that way he's not pulling up somebody's fader, when he should just be not needing to have their mic even on, because it's not necessary. So a lot of the times he needs to know that stuff, because in post, if they do have that ISO track active, they'll just throw it in on the dailies. And it's like, well, they weren't even talking in that bit, so it shouldn't have even been there. That sort of thing. So it's always good to let them know what's going on, and then making choices as far as what needs to be done with the talent and where they need to be mic'd. If there's a shot where I just kind of screwed out of getting the boom up close, I'll relay back to the mixer, and whenever he steps over here on this line, I can't grab that. So if he can just pull up the wire, that sort of thing. We plan all this stuff out, so whenever they roll the cameras, we have our battle plan and we're ready to go. And I'll relay to the utility if we need to make sure that their wire sounds clean, because we'll most likely go to it, or if we need to bring in a plant mic, And I'm always going to the DP and asking, if this light's going to be turned on or this one's going to be turned off, or hey, are you going to see this area right over here? If not, we'd like to put up, like a 12 by just to dampen some of the reflections in the room or something like that. So just all sorts of things. And like, or if there's a walk and talk, it's up to me to rehearse with the camera, his movements, so I can make sure I'm not in the shot. I'm constantly rehearsing with second team, when they bring in the stand-ins to go through the motions with camera. If I'm not there doing that, then I'm not even going to know what camera's doing. I'll be all over the shot. So I have to communicate with camera constantly about, what size lenses they're using, so that I have an idea of what the frame is going to be like based on the distance of the camera on the shot. And that also helps me decide, like, oh, okay, I'll be able to get in really tight right here between these two people having a conversation. I'll go to the MKH 50. Whereas if I'm 4 feet up in the air, because it's a wide shot, I might use the shotgun,
Okay.
So it's all these things. And that's constantly what I'm doing. Well, everybody's, getting crafty and stuff like that, So, and then the sound utility, he's doing basically everyone's job. He's helping the mixer if there's any kind of issues that he's having. He might be cleaning up some wires that need to be cleaned. He might be moving some cables around and getting them set up for another room. He might be tweaking the antenna for the Comtex because the producer's having trouble hearing or something. God knows what. Just anything and everything that the mixer can't do at the time that I can't do, because we're both, actively doing something. He's working out all the bugs and the kinks. There's a generator we hear somewhere outside. He's the one that's going and trying to find it while we pay attention to what's going on set. He's trying to get that turned off. He's trying to get his second boom mic set up because we need 2 booms in this. So then he might come in and he might help, and he might boom with me. Utility's got a pretty rigorous job. He's constantly on his feet, always moving. He's miking up talent. He's also constantly trying to tweak and improve the microphones. Sometimes over a period of time, people get sweaty and microphones shift on the talent. So he'll have to constantly go in and reapply some adhesive or something and tweak the wires and make sure they're good. And he's doing that basically all day, Oh yeah. And he's the guy who's jamming time code in the cameras and making sure that the slate is good and dishing out fresh batteries for not only us, but a lot of departments come to us for batteries too, and he'll be running stuff to them. He makes sure that if there's a new producer that just walked on set, that he gets a Comtech, and a set of headphones so he can listen. Our utility is the blood of the sound team. He's always pumping, always moving, and trying to give everything to the vital pieces, what we all need. So
out of all the projects you've worked on, what's been the most interesting one so far?
The most interesting one so far was probably Escape Plan 2. It was the most action-packed, the most stunt-heavy, and just any kind of obstacle course that could be thrown at us in a short period of time, it was. So it was very, very challenging the whole time, because we shot that entire movie in 4 weeks. Usually when you shoot a feature, you were there, you're at the panel, how they say, like, well, we'll shoot like 2 scenes in a day. Whereas on Escape Plan 2, we were doing like 180 setups a day.
Wow.
It's unheard of. And I was just kind of like baffled. And Bo Williams was the mixer on that. And he called me and he told me, he's like, I need somebody, who's fast paced and everything. He's like, I don't think anything like this you've ever worked on is like this. This is like TV show pace, but times 3, and I'm just sitting there going, okay, yeah, I'm your guy. We'll get through it. I'm up for a good challenge. And so the first day, it was just kind of like, I've done stunts before, and fight sequences and stuff, but this is James Liu, and it's super martial arts heavy. And I've never had to deal with such a difficult uniform, because all the prisoner uniforms are these super starched, dyed wardrobe. And it's like, and I'm friends with the wardrobe people that worked on it. And I've known them for years, since Vampire Diaries, and I love these people, and they always try their best to, think of sound whenever they're doing the wardrobe. But it's like, for this situation, for what the director wanted, it's like, we are so sorry, but you are screwed. Like, this is some noisy wardrobe. And so add that on top of the fact that these people are, doing triple flips in the air and, kicking people and all this other stuff. So I had to figure out a way to wire them fast, because Stallone, he would refuse to take a wire unless I could do it in under a minute. Just things like that. I was just like, oh my God, I've never been in these situations, and who knew that, well, Stallone just had this crazy request, whereas like he doesn't like being mic'd up for, too long or whatever. But then again, for me, 2 or 3 minutes isn't long, but so I had to learn how to do things super fast, and then make sure it was good permanently, because he doesn't like being fidgeted with. So if the mic did shift, it's like, well, we're shit out of luck. That's how it's going to sound. We're going to leave him alone, And then the fact that it is a stunt heavy, show, it's like, well, it is going to shift. I mean, this guy's doing all this action and stuff, and everything was shot on location that wasn't at the prison, because the prison was inside, the stages, but everything else was outside at a different location. And a lot of it was, glass buildings and stuff like that. So we had a lot of obstacles to get through there. Everybody was sweating all the time because, again, it's an action thing. And there's just so many things that just, and it wouldn't be all that bad if it wasn't so fast paced either. Because we were constantly just shooting nonstop and going through so many different setups, because I would look at every day, they give us sides, and I'm sitting there looking at how many pages we're doing, and it would be like anywhere between 11 to 15 pages a day, sometimes 16 pages, and I don't know, like 7 or 8 different scenes. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is insane, like what we're all doing and all the different setups, and since they move at that fast of a pace, the DP was great. It's just that he didn't have time to light it in a way that would be, ideal for every department or whatever. And so just all this sort of fast-paced problem solving, it was very, very intense. And then there's a scene where there was a huge fight sequence in the rain. I've done stuff in fake rain, before, with my boom mic all protected and waterproofed. But after a while, I mean, you can't fully waterproof a boom to a point where it just over so much time without drying it off, But since they moved at such a fast pace, I'm out there and I see that my boom is collecting water and all this stuff. And my utility was just running around in circles, just doing all sorts of things to fix these problems. But he, couldn't stop and help me out either. So it was chaotic. And next thing I know, the boom was getting wet, and we had to switch microphones and transmitters and boom poles and all this stuff. It was insane. I've never had to just deal with so much crazy shit, in 4 weeks,
Mm-mm. So when you're micing somebody up, say for a stunt scene, what exactly, do you have any tips on micing up people when they're going to be doing flips? Because they're wearing packs and everything. So.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is, for one, if it's a stunt scene, you don't mic up stuntmen, you only mic up the talent, because that's who we want to hear. And you only do that if there's going to be dialogue, in between whatever, because, well, it also depends on the mixer, because some mixers just don't want their mics on them, period. Because they don't want their microphones to risk getting ruined. And also sometimes, depending on the actor and the stunt, the pack could hurt them, if they land something wrong, or it could ruin the pack, etc. So it all depends on the stunt, and it also depends on the mixer. Most of the actors are just like, yeah, no, it's fine, or they'll take it or whatever, so long as they don't have to constantly mess with it, or it doesn't become a danger and get in the way involved with the stunt. So the only time I'd really mic talent is if they had some sort of dialogue and it was a wide shot, and we could do it in a way where it wouldn't be harmful, and the stunt coordinator was okay with it and the actor was okay with it. If they're all comfortable and it's not going to be seen, that's when you take the step of wiring them in a stunt. And then when you do that, you make sure that it is secure as all hell, lots of tape, make sure it's in a pocket or in a secure place where it's not going to go anywhere. Don't use any clips, if you use a clip, it's just going to go bye-bye. I mean, hell, people use clips on talent and they lose those damn packs just from walking. So I despise clips, I say always use like an actual neopack sort of system, something with a pocket that you can secure it in and then wrench that sucker down on the talent. And then as far as the wire goes, make sure that that thing is completely taped down and secure wherever it's at. And it's not going to go anywhere, and even have them, like, as soon as you mic them up, have them move around and test it, and do a few of their moves or whatever, just to make sure there's no issue. But also, it's all about providing slack, if you put on too short of a wire and this thing is going from their ankle or their thigh to their chest, and they're doing some stunt where they bend over backwards or something, well, that thing is going to get ripped off, because you didn't provide any slack. So you just got to be very mindful of all those things and what they're doing, and pay attention during the rehearsals and think, about these things ahead of time, because a lot of people don't, and then it just becomes, crazy and doesn't work. And it's like, well, you should have foreseen that, but it just comes with experience and trial and error. But that's the thing, is this production was not something for anybody who was new, and Bo couldn't stress that. He was just like, I need some people because who know what they're doing. It was definitely tough, and if we didn't know what we were doing, it would just been crazy. We had a few people who were inexperienced in like the PA field or something, and a few people that got sent home just because they couldn't keep up, But hey, I was like, it's Stallone. I'll work on it, and just so I can see, firsthand what this guy's all about.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Tell me a little bit about Hangman with Al Pacino. Was it in Karl Urban?
Hangman was a really, really fun gig to work on. I worked with Mike Schmidt. It was still fast-paced, very much like an episodic sort of thing, even though it was a feature, because they had such a low budget. They had to shoot things quickly. They didn't have all the time in the world to film, but it wasn't like craziness, like, Escape Plan or anything.
Yeah. When you're working this close with, these A actors like, Al Pacino and Karl Urban, I mean, what's the dynamic that goes on with you guys?
Well, basically, I mean, you introduce yourself, on the first day and who you are, and they know you have a job to do, and, we know that they have a job to do. And if you feel that they're engaging or whatever, you can feel free to have a conversation or whatever, just like you would anybody else. That's the biggest thing, is just treat them like anybody else. For instance, you see him come in and he maybe looks a little bit tired, and it's just kind of like, did you get enough sleep, man? What's up, or if they come in and they don't even, lock eyes with you and they're just on their phone or whatever, okay, fine. They, just like anybody else, they're not really looking for conversation right now. So you just leave them be and do your job. Yeah, they're just like pretty normal people. And like Karl was great. I mean, I even asked him questions because he knew I was a fan. I show up to work all the time with superhero shirts and all this other stuff. So, I'd be like, so when are you going to do Dread 2? And all this stuff, and just kind of bust his chops. And, he was just kind of like, oh man, I don't know when I'm going to do that. But, I was thinking it'd be nice. And, and it's like, you should totally do like a skit where you're making fun of like Stallone as Judge Dredd. That'd be great. It's just constantly mess with him. But he's just a normal guy. And Al, he kept to himself very much, but when he was around people, he was very friendly, and he would try his best to shake everyone's hand and introduce himself to everybody he didn't know who was new. But yeah, that's some of the people you got to work with. You work with some really out there folks who are like just borderline sociopaths or narcissists, but other times some of the nicest people you've ever met. So you get all different kind of walks of life, just like any job,
Exactly. That's true. I guess out of all the jobs you've worked on, what was your worst on-set experience? You don't have to give names if you don't want to.
Let's see. My worst on-set experience. I was working on this film. I'm not going to say what film it is, just for the sake of, I don't like bad-mouthing anybody, but we were filming recently after the Sarah Jones incident. Are you aware with what happened there?
I am, but can you give us a little background on that?
Sarah Jones was working on this production called Midnight Rider, and the producers and the director and everything, they were completely irresponsible about the safety of their crew when working on this location next to some train tracks. And they decided to film on these train tracks without having gone through the proper procedures to make sure that it was shut down, that everything was safe in that environment, that they had a permit to film there, all sorts of shit that they just did wrong. And ultimately it led to Sarah Jones's death because a train came and hit this hospital bed that was a prop, on the thing and just completely took her out. And it was awful. Those people are in prison now because of it, But this film that I was doing took place maybe a year after this. And here we are, we're on location, we're on a bridge, and they're doing this stunt where this woman is supposed to be hanging and dangling over a railroad track. And this bridge is not high, so it has enough room for a train to go under it. And they wanted to hang her body on this. And I'm like, do we have permits to do that? Like, I know that this is an indie film. We hardly have officers to block roads right now. So tell me what's going on with this, and do we have a stunt coordinator here to do all this? We didn't have any of that. And so I was just like, I'm not going to allow this to happen. And one of the producers that was on set even had a problem with it and started yelling at the director and then the executive producer and all this other stuff. And she walked off in a huge argument too. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm not working on this. So what had happened was even my mixer, he was just kind of like, oh, come on, man, don't make like a big deal out of it. And I was just like, no. I was like, dude, you can fire me right now. I don't care. And it's like, I said something, I said my piece. Y'all shouldn't allow this to happen. I'm done. And I won't work on this film anymore if y'all allow this to happen. And so they finally caved and they changed it, to where she's standing on the ledge of the bridge. And a good friend of mine who I know who is working in the grip and electric department, who is a certified rigger, put her in a harness himself and had his hands on the harness at all times when doing the shot when she was on the ledge. That I was okay with because, again, he was certified and this was much safer than her dangling from this thing. And sure enough, when they started to shoot that scene, a train came and, she got down. I was like, you see? You would never have gotten her up in time for that to happen, and we would have just been responsible for this woman's death. Like, it was just insane. So that was probably the most crazy moment I've had on set. And don't be afraid to speak up. If you see something, say something. Nobody in this industry is going to give you shit for, walking off and telling people how it is about safety. I mean, it's paramount. Never, ever swallow your pride or think that you're pissing people off or anything like that, or being this odd man out whenever it comes to safety. If you see something that's unsafe, say something about it, talk to your union rep, etc. But don't ignore it, because it could be, a matter of, or the difference between somebody living and somebody dying.
Man, yeah, and definitely after something, we had the tragedy in the past, why they possibly would be putting the crew and the actors in an awful situation as well. So,
and I had one other incident happen that was, I want to say probably equally just as disturbing, and this is for people who are doing bag work and I guess have to basically look out for themselves. You don't have the union backing you, that sort of thing. This will happen to you. Some producers will try and screw you out of your money when you take these sort of gigs. And I was doing a commercial or TV spot for Coca-Cola, and it wasn't Coca-Cola doing it. They go out to these production companies or, sister production companies that they just give the money to and they make it all happen, And that's what this was, is this woman was a producer for them, that they gave her a certain budget to do this commercial. And so I got referred to by a good friend of mine, and she called me up and I was like, yeah, I can work, I can do it. And instantly I just got a bad vibe because she just like lowballed me on a rate. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it for that. So didn't get the gig at first, but then I got a call back and they're like, okay, fine. We'll give you this rate. And I'm like, great. So we get there. There was no paperwork at first. So that's red flag number one. We're filming in a very, very dangerous location, like in like the most crime ridden, like just spot of Atlanta. And I noticed that there's no security for our cars or our gear. And I'm like, so is anybody watching this stuff while we're going around and shooting all this stuff on the fly? It's like, well, you just, lock up all your stuff in your cars. And this person here is, we'll have one person here, a PA will be here always watching stuff. And I'm like, okay, doable. I'll lock all my shit in my car and we have a PA. And sure enough, we go to another location. Again, it's just really bad. And I don't know what the PA was doing or whatever, but whenever we got done shooting one thing, my bag that was right next to set that was supposed to be, being watched was gone.
Oh, no.
Somebody swiped it and stole it. And so I was just like, well, we can't finish the gig, like I don't have any of my gear. And they're like, well, can we do this? Can we shoot this? And they still wanted to keep shooting, regardless of the fact that I had, missing like thousands of dollars of my gear. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that because I don't have my, gear. I was like, yeah, I can keep recording, but I'm not going to because I'm more worried about getting my shit back. So they're like, well, look, we'll shoot this stuff here. All right. And we will have, somebody call the cops and all this other stuff or whatever. So they tell me all this stuff. And then after we get done shooting, they find my bag. And I'm like, how'd you find it? And they're like, well, we paid some kids some money to talk about your bag, or whatever. And they're like, well, I know this person who's got this. So we paid about $100 to get your bag back.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, why didn't you call the cops? Like that's what any sane person would do. What is this? It's like, well, when you're in the ghetto, you got to kind of, think like the ghetto and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, this is very unprofessional. This is really, really weird. Prior to all that happening, when we were just talking about my gear being missing, I was like, I need to go ahead and just start filling out, an entire quote of all my gear missing. So, you can reimburse me this, and she's like, I'm not going to reimburse you. And the producer said that. And I was like, no. When I am on your production, all right, it is your responsibility as a producer to provide insurance for every parties involved in case somebody gets hurt, etc. I was like, what do you mean you're not going to compensate? I'm working on a gig for you. All right, I'm an employee employed under you. If something goes missing or damaged of mine, it's your job to replace it, period. That's what insurance is for. And so she and I kind of butt heads about that instantly. And because she wasn't, having that, she's like, we'll talk about it after we get done shooting. I'm like, all right, fine. I get it. I see what you're trying to do, and so at the end of the day, when we finished filming and all this, after all these red flags coming up, I was just like, so I need my pay like today, just because of the fact that there's been no paperwork involved. There has been, arguments about just a matter of replacing my gear and all this stuff. I don't have a comfortable knowledge that you are a professional. And because of that, I need to get paid now before I leave, especially since you didn't even call the cops when my gear went missing. You just hustled to get it back. And so then she's like, okay, well, are you going to reimburse me for the money I paid for finding your bag? And I was like, no, I'm not. I was like, what are you talking about? Wow. It wasn't my idea to go bribe some kids on the street to get my gear back in the first place. You should have called the cops. You're out of $100 of money because you decided to. And so we got into it, and she was like, okay, well, fine. I'm gonna pay you this amount, minus this. And I was like, no, that's not what we agreed to. Why do you keep changing this shit up? I was like, now I'm serious. If I don't have a check in hand right now, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to fly. She's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, it's simple. You need, and I take out the SD cards of my mixer, and I held them up in my hand. I was like, you need these. This is your sound, all of it. I was like, you don't have any camera hops or anything like that. You have no backup stuff. This is all your sound right here. You pay me right now, or I'm going to walk with all your sound. And then that really perked her ears up. So she got pissed off, started cussing me out and all this other stuff. All the rest of the people on the crew were just kind of like, this is really bad business, And so finally she gave me a W-2 to fill out and all this other stuff. I'm like, finally, some actual paperwork and all this stuff. And so fill it out, and then I get my check and I see it, and, I got it, and I put it through my bank. Everything showed up. It cleared. And I gave her the card back. And it was just nonstop. She just cussed me out, all this harassment, all this sort of stuff. Very, very unprofessional. And the whole time I'm just like, I don't care what you think of me or whatever, but I am standing my ground because you are very unprofessional. You're very disrespectful, and you're a con artist, and I was like, I'm not going to put up with this. So you can be butthurt all you want, but I'm getting paid the rate that I was promised, and I'm not leaving until I get it. And you're not getting anything that I did for you until then. So, and the basic lesson of this story is stand your ground, because you're not backed by a union. You don't have lawyers ready to just defend you or whatever. So in that case, you have the ultimate bargaining chip as a sound mixer. When it comes down to it, you can hold hostage all this audio if you feel like these people aren't going to pay you, but you will work with some shady people like that. People will do bad business. You'll have to chase down your paychecks sometimes, and you'll have to remember these people so you don't work with them again. It's always good to, when you do work with certain people, before you do, call up some other people, see what they know about this person, etc. Check out their credentials, because there will come a time when you come across somebody like this who will try to out of what they owe you. It's happened to me several times before, but this was the most extreme incident, because I was just like, this is way too Twilight Zone-y right now for, me to be missing my bag, all this crazy stuff happening. It was just one red flag after the other, and I should have walked from the beginning of the day. You do what you can do because you got to make money. So,
wow, yeah, that's a crazy one right there.
Mm-hmm. And then I called up my friend who referred me, and I told him all about it, and he was just like, "Dude, I'm so sorry. Good on you for standing your ground." And it made me, feel better because I was rather new at the time, and I'm like, yeah, no, good for me for standing my ground. I shouldn't be feeling bad about any of this shit. I didn't do anything wrong. That's another crazy story for you.
Wow. Yeah. Now, I also saw that you worked on one of the Fast and Furious films, Furious 7.
Yeah, I day played on that for, I want to say 2 days. I think it was 2 or 3 days. I can't remember. But it was when they had came back to do some reshoots in Atlanta, and Whit Norris had moved on to another production at the time. And so they had another guy from LA, I think, who knew Whit, and they called him up and were like, hey, our utility's sick. Do you know anybody who can just step in for the next few days? They called me up, and I'm super grateful about that. That was like my first union gig that I had worked on with, some crazy budget like that. And I came in and I was all excited, eager to do something. And it turns out it was just the first day, it was that helicopter scene. They shot all of that footage of this helicopter, and it was green screen, and we didn't have to mic anybody up because the mics were put inside their helmets. So it was like my job was already done as far as doing that. And I just, dished out Comtex, and I had, jammed slates and cameras for time code and whatnot, and, rebatted things and just did your typical sound utility duties. But after that, it was just so laid back, and chill, because they were only shooting that scene the whole day. And it was so easy doing that job, and they never even broke for lunch. So we were getting meal penalty after meal penalty after meal penalty. So all this bonus pay, I made so much money in those 2 or 3 days just doing practically bare minimum. And that was the most easiest day I ever worked on a set, was those days. I've never had an easier day like that again. So it's pretty interesting.
That's good, yeah. For some of our listeners that are just getting started, do you have any freelance tips that you could share?
Don't be afraid to thrift. Buy used gear, man. Don't blow your wad on all sorts of new equipment and build up a whole bunch of debt with credit cards and shit, because you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot in the long run. Save up your money. If you're going to school right now, save up your money. Like, don't, screw going to movies, screw, buying food, at a restaurant or something. Just cook your own stuff. Just whatever you can do to save money. It's better to get it all in cash versus putting yourself in debt and having to constantly still pay off credit cards that are gaining interest and all this for years and years to come. I'm speaking from experience. And if you have some equipment that you're trying to upgrade, sell it first. Don't buy something and then go to sell that. Just sell it first, because you never know whenever you're trying to buy some new gear, or used new gear, whichever one, when there might be, a deal that may come up versus you already bought this, and then all of a sudden you sell your equipment and you put that money towards whatever you used, that money you spent to buy that equipment, and, oh, well, I could have traded this in, for something. Or just always make sure you get rid of the gear before you get the new stuff. I think that's my opinion, because I rather have the money for something to put towards it versus not have it, and then I can't sell something. There have been times when I was like, all right, I'm gonna sell this thing and I'm gonna upgrade to this, and then when I go to sell it, all of a sudden I realize, oh well, shit, this thing isn't the value it was, because I procrastinated or something, or maybe they stopped making this item, and I didn't do enough research into how much I'd really be getting from this thing. Because that's the thing, is you might think you could get this much money for this item that you sell, but instead you get this. And so then you kind of screwed yourself out of whatever you thought you would get back from it. Always know how much money you have before you buy any kind of gear. And don't buy anything that you don't intend to use a lot. Perfect example. When I do bag work and all that stuff, I don't do a lot of gigs that require me to have IFBs or Comtex, So even though the thought has crossed my mind, I might want to get a Comtech transmitter, a few Comtex, and some headsets for people, just to have. But then again, I'm like, well, is it being used enough? Is there a demand enough for it for the work that I do, to pay all that back if I do put the money out to get it? And the answer is no. So I don't do it. And if I do need it, if a job comes up that I do need it, well, it's all worked into the gear rental, If they need that, I tell them, okay, it's going to be this extra amount of money. And then I call up the rental place and I say, I need this, because I can get it. I'm just the liaison. They're practically renting it from this company, but I'm the one using it, There's no shame in that. And for me, it doesn't take anything out of my pocket, If anything, I might be able to earn a little bit more because I'm the one operating it, So yeah, it's a win-win versus me going and blowing some money on some shit that I might use once or twice a year, Don't do that. If you really have a need for, 2 wireless channels for whatever it is you're doing, then get it. If not, don't do it. If you're constantly doing interviews, with people where it's just a shotgun over a dude's head, one person talking on camera and stuff, if that's, a good chunk of your work, don't go out and buy, a bunch of wireless channels, because there's no need for it until you build up that clientele where they're calling you for those kind of gigs. So that's my biggest tip, for spending money and gear and then just getting started,
Yeah. Good advice.
And don't think that just because some level of equipment is consumer product, that it can't be professional. When I first got started, I bought like an Aston like analog mixer. It wasn't even a recorder, it was just a mixer. And it had 4 channels. And then I would output through the left and right output signals to a Zoom, the little field recorder. And this was an older one. It's not like the new ones they have now, which are actually pretty nice. But I would output that signal to the Zoom F4, which only had 2 channels, 4 channels technically, if you were using the onboard microphones. But whenever you're doing an input, all I had is a left and a right signal. What's important is, how does it sound? And are you able to meet their needs, whatever it is they need? And so my first few gigs I did was interviews, and I had a boom and I had a wireless channel, and I would pan my wireless to the right and my boom to the left. So I still had 2 separate tracks. And here I am, mixing with this Aston for something to plug in my equipment and then send the signal into my F4. And so if I had several wireless channels, it would all still go to the right, which is unfortunate. But hey, they get what they pay for. So it's like, I'm not ashamed for using the gear I did for what they were paying me. What's more important is, how does it sound? Is it something that's good? Is it something they can use? Despite the fact that what I was doing was really, really low in quality equipment, it still sounded great. It was still stuff that was usable. And if you can make something that sounds great with shit equipment, you're going to be great when you get your hands on some professional gear. I'm just saying. And so I wasn't ashamed of it at all. I'd show up, I'd have this crazy looking rig, just with this really crappy bag that I had. It came with the Aston mixer and this boom pole that was, aluminum and only extended, a certain amount of feet, but I didn't need anything more than that. I didn't need a cinema pole. I'm just doing interviews, and sometimes I wouldn't even record into the F4 because I had a cable that was, that could tether from the mixer straight into camera, because these people, they love that stuff. And I would just go around, at these conventions and do stuff like that too. So here I am, I saved all this money, on using gear that I, accumulated from school, and then added a few more things like, the mixer, which was cheap, but it did the trick, and nobody ever gave me a call and was like, hey, this stuff sounds like crap. What kind of equipment did you use? I never got that. And once the needs, got bigger and bigger, and for instance, I got a phone call. It's like, we need a multi-track, recorder, blah, 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 all this stuff. I was like, okay, all right. So then I'd go and I'd rent, a 633, sound devices and whatnot, and as I needed. But since I started renting multi-track recorders more and more, what did I need to do? I needed to update my equipment. I was getting a more need for that. And so finally, I spent the money for an F8, which is still $1,000, but it sounds just as good as any other mixer I've worked with, and nobody knows the difference. They just care about what it sounds like. So,
man. Well, man, as we kind of wrap things up, we appreciate all your great stories and experiences on set. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you can share with our listeners?
Always be open to learning new things. Don't ever think you know everything, because, I've met that person, that other sound guy or whatever that thinks they know everything, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot, all the time. Gear is changing, the equipment is changing, the technology is changing. Even the methods of filming are always changing. So, always be adaptable, always be open, and be as patient and kind as possible, but also don't be a walking mat, you know when it is necessary to stand your ground. You are a person. Don't let anybody treat you, like you're dirt. And don't be afraid, like, oh, I'm going to lose my job, if I don't eat shit from this person. It's okay to stand your ground as long as, you're doing everything possible that's kind, open, honest, and considerate. And if you have trouble with, people skills, work on it. Don't ever be afraid to fail. I'd rather go out there and be vulnerable and have courage and fail in doing something and learn from it versus not doing it at all or trying to, make the effort. But that also, in trying, don't confuse that with being big-headed and think you know everything and have, a level of confidence or whatever that, because I see people who come into this industry and, like I said, just act like they know everything and they don't ask questions. They end up failing, but it's not anybody's fault, but theirs, because they never bothered to humble themselves enough to really say that they don't know something. It's hard to explain, but if you can kind of find a good balance in all those, you'll do fine.
Yeah. Yes. So if people wanted to find out more about your work and wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can get in touch with me by email, which is tharland@gmail.com. It's my first name. Even though I go by TJ, my first name is Terry with an H, kind of like Thomas. It's very weird to spell, but yeah, tharry.garland@gmail. And then if you want to, research some of my work, IMDb's basically where it's at. So,
all right. I want to say thanks again to TJ Garland. He is in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So if you're in the area working, look him up.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcasts and iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.